There we go. Well, everybody, welcome to 2025. Hopefully, we had a good Christmas. I want to relieve you of any stress right now. We are not going to talk at all about Christmas or how to review your Christmas or how to do all of that. You probably should do that, and we have some ideas around that. If you want it, you can drop it in the chat and just go, "Hey, we still haven't done a debrief of our Christmas. Do you guys have anything about how to do that well?" Drop that in the chat, and we'll get that to you. But we're not going to do that on the call today. Um, because if you still have your tree up or your lights up, we need to have an offline conversation around those things for you. But hopefully you had an amazing holiday. We got lots of reports of guys within our network and just good things. And, we talked a lot about like what service times to have and all that kind of thing. And everybody messing around with that and trying to figure all that out. And, at the end of the day, I think everybody kind of felt like you did well. And, I don't know if anybody felt I did not hear from anybody that felt like they missed it as far as that was concerned, but I'm sure that even part of your review would be like, okay, what did we learn about that? Because just fair warning, and again, I promised we wouldn't talk about Christmas, and I am for 30 seconds. Next year is no different. So just so you know, like as we were offline meeting, we were talking about like Christmas literally just moves one day deeper into the week. So you're still going to be dealing with all of the drama of what we're doing. And so just be aware of that because some of the learnings from this year will be helpful in the future for you, in the near future for you as you look at that and try to work that out. Okay, here's what we're gonna do today. As I share screen, we will do a whole bunch of things that I think will be helpful for you guys. Our hope is to blow through some stuff pretty quickly. I'm going to turn it over to Jeff here for like 3 minutes to give us a little update on something. Just so you guys know, like I'm just putting this date out there because some of you guys have asked. We're not registering, we're not promoting people, but a lot of you guys make this a regular part of your fall. So as you're doing your yearly planning, if you wanted these dates, last month we talked a little bit about the two different things. If you're a lead guy on the call, you probably have different things or groups that you're a part of. Awesome. Jeremy Peterson with the XP group has a deal in Nashville in May that he can give you information on if you want to drop it in the chat. But this is the Growminum Network deal. This isn't, just client only. This is everybody that's on calls, everybody that's just like, man, like-minded. We do a couple days with some add-ons this year in October. So just mark those dates down, maybe put them in your calendar and just so that as stuff starts loading in, we would love to have you work around that as we have some plans for this year to be better than ever. So there is that. Here's what we're going to do today on the call. And just like always on the call, our goal is one of our mantras is, and our mission statement is, we want you guys to pause even on these think tank calls for an hour and spend a little time working on it, not in it. Some of you guys just stepped out of meetings. Some of you guys are going to step into meetings after this that are very in it, very granular, which is great. That's part of what leadership is. Our goal is to give you at least a little bit of thought, maybe even some resources within our team to lift you out of that a little bit. And hopefully you can take that back to your team and begin to run with it. Some of you guys are in the middle of a lot of working on it. If your Januaries are planning times or assessment times or those things, you're doing a lot of work on it right now. So the timing is really, really helpful for that. And we're here for that as well. And so some of you guys have reached out about doing S&Ps. Some of you guys have reached out about doing 1 days, like just getting with the team 1 day. If you're on the call and you're like, man, I really need to have a conversation about getting Growminum stuff integrated, even if it's just like a day to come in. Just telling you guys, like, we're in the first of the year right now. So it probably would be good for you guys to reach out and just say, hey, can we have a conversation about what that might look like to get some help with strategic planning or to get some help with some different things through this year. Even if you're thinking like May, June, we're going to do some of that. Now would be the time because we want to be able to help you work on it, not just in it. Cool. So hit it, email, you can drop it in the chat and we can make that happen. Okay. Here's the three things we're going to try to do in 49 minutes. And so we're not going to get through all of this, but it's better to have more to say and run out of time than to have empty silence at the end of your small group. And so here we go. I'm going to give Jeff just a minute or two here to share a little bit, as some of you guys would probably be interested in hearing from Jeff as he's on the ground in Pasadena and can give you guys an update. And I asked Jeff not just to give you an update, but to kind of give you some direction as you're navigating potentially wherever you are. Like, how do we help? Jeff's going to speak to that in just a minute. Then we're going to spend a, we could probably spend the whole call, but we're going to spend just a moment talking a little bit about trends that you guys may have seen that are out there and wrestling with those a little bit. And then we want to spend the rest of our 30 minutes really talking about this word empathy and what does empathetic leadership look like on a personal, an organizational, and an evangelistic approach. Okay. So, Jeff, if you're on there, I'm going to actually stop screen sharing for a second and just let you unmute and talk. I'll tee Jeff up. Jeff is pastored in Pasadena in Southern Cal for many, many years, has just recently taken a new position in Anaheim, but is deeply embedded there with the fires that are ongoing and has been a good connection point. And so I asked Jeff earlier this weekend if on this call today, he might just give you guys an update and then also maybe a little bit of direction as far as where you can steer some things. So, Jeff, I see you're situated now. So perfect timing, bro. Look, we know what we're doing. Jeff, I yield the floor. Make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thanks everyone for jumping on here today. One of the things with Growmentum Group is we value the relationship amongst here. I mean, you can see it from the Think Tank Live to different things like this that we do throughout the month to stay connected, and just the community that continues to be built from this is incredible. The reason why I acknowledge that value of this as a community is because a lot of you have text messaged me and checked in on me. Either you or someone on your church staff I know have reached out. The reality is I've been in ministry for a long time, but really about a decade ago, I left to plant a church in Pasadena. And so for the last decade-ish of my life, I've been in Pasadena. I just recently just took a new role here just a couple months ago in Anaheim. As Lee said, that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day. But with the last decade of my life being in Pasadena, I mean, a lot of my ministry connections are there. A lot of my city connections are there. And so with the disaster that happened with the Eaton fire over the last 7 to 8 days, I have been deeply embedded and pulled into what's going on there, and then also connected to stuff that's even happening in the Palisades with some of these Southern California fires. And so, first of all, thank you all for reaching out, texting. For those of you that did, it has been incredible. And I'll even start by saying this, man, there's so much hope in the local church rallying behind what's happening. It has been the beautiful part to see the local church step up and just be the hope to the world. The reality is the fire is probably worse than you can imagine, and the devastation is worse than even media can fully show. When you drive through the streets, even north of barricades where you can't get at this point, there are not words that can articulate what you experience. And so, as many of you are asking questions, hey, how do we help? How do we support? I'll give you these personal stories, and then I'll give you direction, and then I'll hand it back over to Lee. With doing life over there, I've probably got about 120 families that I know that directly lost their home. I read a report today that there's probably 7,000 structures that have been destroyed in that Eaton fire alone, not including the Palisades. You could even say that there are reports coming out today that this is the worst catastrophe in the United States with dollar value, not people's lives lost, but dollar value of infrastructure destroyed. And so the amount of things that have been destroyed between all these Southern California fires this time has been devastating. I was literally on a call today with a guy that runs a CrossFit gym from the Palisades fire. He owns one of the longest standing gyms. He's a believer, loves Jesus in Los Angeles. I mean, for example, the story that I heard from him this morning is when he got the call coaching the classes on the evening last Tuesday night. He tried to race home, and before he got there, his wife stepped out, saw the fire racing towards his house. His wife had to get in the car, start driving away. As she was driving away, she realized that the fire was even coming towards her car. She had to get out of her car with her baby and 4-year-old and run a mile and a half from the fire to get safe. That's how fast these fires hit. But then there's stories like my friend Perry from my gym that has been to the church that we planted. He lost his insurance on Monday, then to lose everything on Tuesday. So there's so much pain and devastation that's happening. So many of you are reaching out saying, "Hey, how do we help? How do we reach out?" There have been an incredible amount of supplies and things sent. Supplies are not what's needed right now. The local church has rallied. People have
Jeff,
sent.
I'm going to stop you real quick right here.
Yep.
So just time out. Like, so
Sure.
as Jeff pivots to this, I want everybody to make sure you're plugged in and we're, even if you're at a distance, because this part is, I want you to hear one for your personal, but also if you're interacting with people that are like, we're going to collect a bunch of stuff and send it. Time out. You need to hear what Jeff has to say. Okay. Sorry, Jeff. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're good. I mean, and it's not that we didn't need it. It's that we have done such an incredible job of sending supplies. So if you partner with Convoy Hope delivered, man, they were going to send trucks to LA and kind of be a center hub to send to all of these sites. Convoy of Hope pivoted and sent semi trucks to Pasadena. Red Cross has sent, trucks to Pasadena. Supplies are of abundance all across Pasadena. And so just so you guys know that, there are going to be things immediately like gift cards that are needed. So as you're giving ask out to your networks, or just circles of influence, whether church or organization, the reality is gift cards are needed. But what we're doing right now, and this is the biggest thing, this is not going to be a month-long disaster. This is going to be a disaster that lasts years to recover from, to rebuild from. And so, as you're giving ask to people, one, you need to cast proper vision, that this is going to be something that we need to surround ourselves and support for a while. And so, what's happening right now is we are gathering a list of all of the families that lost their homes. We've got a good amount of families that are on that list already, and that's continuing to build by the moment, from local churches in the community, the church I planted and handed over, as well as other local churches that I'm partnered with and known for many years. That you can stand firm that they preach the gospel, life, death, and resurrection. But as we're gathering that list, the reality is this: is we're seeing the desire for churches to adopt families. That is something that you can get prepared to do. So, Lee called and said, "Hey, what can we do?" I said, "Stockpile your resources right now, because as we assess the need, that's a key word, assess. It's kind of like ready, fire, aim versus ready, aim, fire. Right now, we're trying to aim and assess what needs are for these families." My wife was texting a family last night that lost their home. This gives you an idea. She lost her home, lost everything, is in an interim spot for 4 months, and then will get more to a designated spot where she can ask and get and take more stuff on. In the same way, a family just a couple of days ago, and I'll close this up here pretty quickly. They needed clothes, so we got clothes sent to the city in a truck. Basically a warehouse full of clothes sent to the city. We went to give them clothes, and one of the families said, "Jeff, we have nowhere to put the clothes." So here's the point. If you give them stuff, they don't have places to put it. So this need's going to take longer. So as we're assessing and aiming where to fire and to help, the reality is start stockpiling, and we can get you connected to families that you can adopt. So the family last night's going to create an Amazon wish list. I'm connecting them to a church in Long Beach today. That church is just going to buy everything on that list and completely take care of that list. These are people that don't know Jesus. These are people that are getting connected to a local church and are going to see the local church rally around them. So it's an incredible opportunity, and there's a lot of hope in this because of how the local church is rallying. So to be clear, stockpile your resources, get connected. I'll send you a link where you can sign up to be a partner, and then you can help adopt these families. And so I'll put it in the chat now, and we'll
Yeah, I
send
was
you.
going to say that's good, Jeff. Yeah.
I'll put it in the chat right now. But again, you're going to go on this website through a local church. You're going to support to be a partner so the local church can be the hero. But then you're going to be able to help support these families and adopt families. And then we'll also send it in the follow-up email to how you can do that after. Lee, any other questions you got to help clarify things I said there?
No, that's great. I think that I would just summarize a brief back, a term we use. What Jeff said is number one is if you could drop your email, Jeff will drop the link. But if you're interested in connecting with Jeff, and again, some of you guys, you're already in it and doing it. Awesome. Do that. This is Jeff's, this isn't that, but we've had so many guys go, what do we do? And we felt like Jeff being literally on the ground is helpful. If you would like to kind of follow up with Jeff individually, do that. We at the Crossing in Vegas, we sent some initial funds through Convoy, but now we are receiving funds from people because people in your church want to help, and we are holding right now. So we're literally holding and going, okay, let's give it a little bit of breath and let's see where those intentional funds can be best used in the next week to months down the road. And so you do you as far as strategically what works for you. My only caution, if just because I'm unmuted, is sometimes in the urge to do something, we may not do the right thing. And so I wanted Jeff to be heard so that those of you that are in positions of influence and decision making can maybe connect the dots a little bit and kind of make sure that we're prepared to leverage that as best as possible. Jeff, thanks for doing that, man.
And to rewind conversation, even from going into COVID, if you remember a key conversation that really started and really was the center of starting these calls, is we asked the question, where can ground be gained, right? Where's the ground? And that's the question we're ultimately asking in this. How can we gain ground for the local church? And I'm telling you, from being in the middle of it, we are seeing ground gained for the sake of the local church and for Jesus. So this is an opportunity, and there's a lot of hope out of this. I can always share stories to your churches that can help cast that vision. Don't be afraid to reach out. I'll put my email in the chat as well, that you can directly reach out to me. Sound good?
Dude, Jeff, seriously, bro, thank you for being there. And just thank you for being there, bro. Appreciate it so much. And guys, we will manage the chat there so that you can see that. Okay, perfect. So want to pivot just a little bit. I know it's a hard pivot, but welcome to the think tank call. We want to pivot just a little bit as we get into 2025. A couple things that probably should be happening right now is probably, as we said, a little bit of like rolling out your first trimester plan. So basically, if you're doing any kind of planning, both individually and team wise, you should be focusing on, our encouragement would be that you're focusing not only on your year-long focus, but also on your what we call trimester or quarterly for some of you between January to Easter. What are our key elements? What are our key initiatives? And then also from a perspective of like, what are the key things that we want to be focusing on as a church that actually are effective at moving our ball forward towards our 3-year view and our vision that hopefully we've created. So I wanted to throw these up here. I hesitate to do this, but I'm going to do it. So probably most of you guys have seen these. These are Carey Nieuwhof's. Carey's not on the call. So I love Carey. I've been in the same room with him. But I have sometimes I have a little angst when he comes up with these trends and all of that, because some of you are like me. You're like, okay, where is he coming up with these? And where is the reality of like boots on the ground, right? Because you guys are like boots on the ground all the time. And so you kind of see like where these trends are. But I thought some of them would be interesting. We're not going to have a long conversation around this, though some of you would love to. We can do a follow-up, but I just thought I'd throw them up here and then use them as a leaping off point for the rest of our conversation. So if you haven't seen these, we can drop them in there. It's a resource that he has on his blog, and I think there was a deal. So he talked, first of all, about Gen Z is in revival and retreat at the same time. Used some statistics around that generation and how they're leaning in towards spirituality, but not necessarily always leaning in towards Christ. I don't think that's news to any of us. If you're working with Gen Z or are directly related to, especially the young adult, the kind of the would be the younger Gen Z, right? They are in that phase right now. And so I think that's interesting. That would probably be something that you as a church would analyze as you look at your focus, as far as, are we paying attention to that? What does that look like? How is our ministry formulated? Number two, we're going to get to this in a minute. Evangelism is on life support in most churches. I have a guy on my staff that whenever we talk about evangelism, he'll throw this out there. He'll say, evangelism is terrorism nowadays in our culture. And it always makes us pause and go, ooh, that's a strong statement. But in reality, a lot of our culture views any sort of evangelistic push in that light. And so I think there's multi-layers of why evangelism is on life support. I think it's pretty interesting, though. I think Morgan, Brandon and Tony on your podcast that you guys do, they had a little conversation about some of these as well. If you want to drop that in the chat, Morgan, it's totally cool. It might be helpful. I
Yeah.
listened to a bit of it. I know they ran through some of these as well. Number three, church closures appear to be outpacing new church plants 3-1. I don't know where that came from, but that's his deal. What's interesting about that trend is it sucks that church are closing. I mean, we're just being candid on the call. It's probably good that some of these churches are closing. They probably need to close so that new ones can come in. But you didn't hear me say that, except it probably got recorded. But in any case, so I'm not sure that just statistically that's like, oh my gosh, what do we do? We need to stop church closures. I think probably what that means is we need to figure out how do these closures become plants or become ground gain for the emerging churches that are coming in behind some of these that are more running their course. Number four is what he calls the rise of the non-derivative church. Basically, and I'm going to be a little bit snarky right here, but it's okay. You love me. Basically, he talks about this idea of church looking differently, which I completely agree with. And we completely agree with. Like, we believe that your church, and we're going to talk about this on the rest of the call, should be a reflection of your community and should have some non-derivative distinctions. If you've been around forever with Growmentum, you understand we talk about values all the time. What are your unique values? Why does Joe need to be in Lancaster and be unique there? And why does Kevin need to be in the area he is in SoCal and be there, blah, 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 right? It's those distinct non-derivatives. The problem I have with Carey's blog is that he used a really poor example of Matt Chandler getting up and doing the announcements in a really nice way that was what his example of non-derivative. And to me, I'm like, okay, we need to do better than that if that's what non-derivative is. To me, non-derivative is some of you guys probably need to lean into your creatives. This is where you're going to want to hit record because the reality is you guys have a lot of creative arts pastors who are not creative at all. They're karaoke singers and you're paying them a lot of money to do karaoke. And I think in your next one-on-ones with them, that's not true of all of them. I'm really not trying to blow them up. I'm just saying some of you guys should challenge your creative arts people in 2025 to be creative. And that would be this non-derivative thing, right? Because at this point, maybe you're going to have to spark some of that creativity in them. I think Carey's right. I think there is different ways for churches to function in their worship and in some of the ways they approach ministry. And so push on your creatives. In too many of our churches, creativity is actually like dead. And we're having programming teams that are programming 3 songs, a host moment, and a 40-minute message. And if we want to be non-derivative, we've got to figure out what does that distinctively look like within our churches. So again, non-derivative means don't imitate and copy everybody else. So that's the uniqueness of what's going on there. Okay. And then the fifth one he has is the church leader mental crisis is about to get worse. I thought that was an interesting take that he had there. I think part of that is because we need to be careful that we don't make that a self-fulfilling prophecy, that we actually do have church leaders who are actually doing the things that they are biblically standing up in front of their churches and saying people should be doing, we should be doing, right? And so sometimes there's an unhealth because of expectations, et cetera, that are not there. And the word that kind of comes out of this, I know you guys badly want to unmute, and you probably should, and say something. Feel free to interrupt me. But I feel like these trends are probably worth you guys paying attention to. I want to caution you that you don't walk into your team and throw these 5 things down on the table and go, we got to change everything we're doing. Do not do that. All right. Most of you guys, unless you're not running a vision play, unless you're not aware of your values, you probably need to pay. If you are currently not aware of your vision, not clear on your values, and don't have a clear focus for the year, then we need to chat about, strategic momentum process. We need to chat about some structure there. We don't need to just react to the trends. Fair? Okay. Anybody else? I'll give you guys a minute to not hog the call. Anybody read these and want to give some perspective from your perspective, very briefly, please, on any of these that stuck out to you? If this is the first time seeing them, you probably need to process. If you've seen them, I'd be open to a little bit of feedback. Don't be shy. I know Kelly wants to say creativity's dead. Lee, don't say that. Anybody?
Yeah, I'm just glad to know I wasn't the only one who, when I listened to the podcast and heard the reference of Matt Chandler and Red Church, that wasn't like for real. That's your example. Okay, cool. Um, I thought
An
it was
altar call,
helpful.
right, Kevin? An altar call,
Yeah,
dude.
yeah. Like appreciate you. You know where this is helpful? I'm new to our church. I've been at the church for 9 months now. This is helpful for me, I think, in continuing to have someone other than me communicate with our elders team. Hey, here's some things that are being seen in the church world,
Love it.
and so that's where this has been a real benefit for me and our team.
Love it. Anybody else? Quick comment. If I sound a little bit funny, it's just because I think it's hard to pick trends out. I just think it's hard. And so, but I think these are helpful for us to look at. I just don't want people to respond to the trends in an unhealthy way. It's like the individual who's desperate for strategy and goes to a conference and comes back with a plug and play. These trends need to be an awareness that we need to filter ourselves through, and which is what I want to do for the rest of the call to some degree. So I want to kind of model how we take these trends and can effectively use them. Okay. So we're going to move. Um, so here's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the power of empathy. And if you guys will do me a favor in the next 30 minutes before we wind down, I want you to hear everything that I'm going to say and some of the guys will share through the lens of those trends we just talked about, but using this idea of how can empathetic leadership counteract, address, and or enhance some of the trends that we're seeing. Some of what I want to talk about comes from this book. Has anybody read this book? Anybody? I, okay. So, oh, Ryan did. Okay. So here's the deal. Like, potentially, I'm going to suggest this book to you, and you're going to go, I don't know what Lee was smoking. Like, it's fine. But you know how you read a book sometimes and it's like you're just underlining, like, oh, this is great. This has kind of been that for me, but I may just be in a season and you may grab it and go, I don't get it. But this book over the last month has been so life giving to me, alongside my Bible, of course, in the sense of like really emphasizing this idea of empathy and how it works. Ron, as you can see on the picture there, he is the founder of Panera Bread. And this book is really in the genre I love, where he journeys through that whole leadership journey, but also interweaves kind of his learnings around organizational leadership and commitment and conviction. And the title refers to understanding what really matters, which we know what really matters. That's why we're here in Called and Conviction. And how do you actually do that? And I love some of his stuff because it really even parallels a lot of what we teach with our Growmentum tools. He uses a lot of that, like 1 year focus and how do you focus clearly on the 5 most distinctive things you need to do in the next year. So I would encourage you, unless you have a stack of books you still have to get through, this might be worth picking up today and using a little bit of this as a kickoff to your year and reassessing. But it's probably going to mean you're going to have to do some work on the other end. But one of the things he talks about is empathy in the book. And the way he talks about it, I hadn't completely heard before, because they did a year-long, what he calls an empathetic research project. And basically, he and the team of people who were already doing a company called Aban Pan, they literally were getting ready to start Panera Bread, and they spent a year doing empathy research, where they would go into different environments that would mimic a little bit of what they saw, and they would just observe for hours. They would observe the employees, the processes, the customers, what they were experiencing, and they were building a concept out of their empathetic reflections. So he uses the term empathy and says we were trying to build empathy with the people we were wanting to serve. And when he said that, I thought, that's us, guys, right? Building empathy for the people we want to serve. And I've been convicted by it just because I feel like sometimes I build animosity towards the people I've served. Why won't they do what I want them to do? Why won't they sign up for our stuff? Don't they know that this is so helpful, right? But maybe part of our problem is we're missing the bridge of empathy. We're not understanding where they are, what they're experiencing, what they're navigating. So basic definition is empathy, making the effort to feel what other people are feeling. That's not rocket science, but feeling their needs, desires. And then I love this last line, why they are either satisfied or disappointed. That's pretty, you can, that, right? why they are either satisfied or disappointed, right? Run that through the lens of the gospel, run that through the lens of what you're trying to do. And that can start to drive a little bit of where we're getting traction with our with our work and ministry, and where we may not be. Okay, and so part of that is this idea of empathy. Sympathy versus empathy. Just keep in mind, sympathy's nice, empathy's more powerful, right? We're experiencing it together. We're not just observing it, we're actually experiencing it. We're feeling it. It's taking root in us. Our senses are moving it. So what does empathy require of us? Here's the three. Requires that we pull away from our own concerns and obsessions. In the church world, we have obsessions. Our obsessions are come to our church, do our things, right? We're obsessed with the gospel. That's good. We're obsessed with discipleship. We're obsessed with those things. We just have to be careful that we pull back and we look at beyond our own concerns and obsessions. What are people experiencing right now? Okay. I think Jeff talking about the fire is kind of interesting, right? It's a loose, indirect correlation to this where we can have sympathy for the people in the fires and send cash. What I heard Jeff saying is if you really have empathy, you're going to respond differently to the needs that are actually real on the ground there. Makes sense? Because now we're feeling what their concerns are. Then it also requires we extend ourselves emotionally and mentally into another person's mind and experiences. And it requires we observe behaviors and models that won't immediately make sense to us and are ingrained paradigms, right? We were doing an exercise with our team here in Vegas a few weeks ago, and someone had written a question on the board. Why do people look at the things, the steps we want them to take as obligations and not opportunities? And I thought, that's an interesting question, right? And I wonder if some of that is really us not understanding really what the opportunities are with people, and thinking that they have an obligatory look at our things, but in reality, our things are not in alignment empathetically with the pattern and the pace and the perspectives of their lives, right? So that's where empathy comes in. Anybody want to add to that?
Lee, I just want to say, I worked at a church in California for a while, many years ago. We did a survey of commute times, and the average commute was 90 minutes. And we looked at our church calendar and went, we're all angry, we're all frustrated, the connection process
So good.
is working, nothing's working. We had to simplify everything and just go to a really simple model. Again, that was very contextual. It was for that time, that period, and all that space. But when you were talking about that, it was just so resonated with me. There's so often we get frustrated and think, why aren't people doing what we're telling them to do? We may not actually know what they need and what they have time to do. We have this cool little circle and we want them to do these 5 different things. Well, how do we know they can even do one of those things?
So good. Yeah, it's so true because we've got our plans and they're supposed to fit into our plans, and our plans can be good. What I'm espousing today based on the trends is how can we empathetically approach 2025 in a way that really is more impactful. Some of you on the call, as you're at the decision-making table, I would ask you to get off the call today and at least pause for a minute and run the lens of frustration that you have, if you have any, right? Through that filter of empathy. And I would actually say, run the lens of the stuff that you are seeing, I'll use the word succeed, and analyze how much in alignment are the things that are effective in your ministry with the level of where you would empathetically see people as being. You might be surprised that the things that are most effective are the things that align most empathetically with where your culture and your context is. So I would analyze both. The things that are effective, how empathetic are they? Because, man, I want to mimic that. And the things that you're wrestling and struggling with, we can't get anybody to serve. Nobody will serve. Before you do a cattle call and try to have a ministry fair and give everybody Starbucks cards and manipulate and try to, bribe them into serving, maybe we need to look at what is that structure? What are we asking? To Brandon's point, are they driving 90 minutes to serve? Are we asking them to be in a small group, serve twice on Sunday, give 10? I mean, what are we asking them to do? And what do we reasonably see as discipleship? Okay. Real great, Brandon. Thank you for that, bud. Anything else on that before we move? Cool. Next month on the call, Brennan, we're going to talk about the personal empathy piece. I don't want to get into that today because I think it's going to be 45 minutes of stuff. We want to spend some time actually kind of doing self. It sounds kind of very, you know, Gen Z, very self empathy, but we're not going to do that today. We're gonna keep moving. So let me screen share one more time, and kind of dig into a little bit of what might be helpful for you guys. So when you think about empathy organizationally, I want you to think about the truth about silos. Okay, so when you take this empathy thing and you go, okay, what are the trends? The first thing I want to say to you is, as you're working with your teams and you're starting to have meetings and team meetings and assess what they're going to do better in 2025 and one-on-ones. Here's the truth about silos. Silos get a bad rap. Silos are actually, we just use different words for them in our ministries, right? We call them departments, we call them ministries, we call them whatever they are. It's basically the responsibilities that people have that they need to accomplish, right? So everybody's ministry on this call, whether you're a church of 100 or 10,000, is subdivided into some sort of structure, or it should be. The reality is those are silos. The truth, though, is that the level of empathy that we have in our organization will decide how translucent those silo walls are. How much do the people in the different silos care, know, feel what the other people that are leading in those other areas, how much do they feel their pain? How much do they, doesn't mean they go do their job, but how available are they empathetically to begin to assist both emotionally or actually practically in that? And so your organization is going to rise up even higher in 2025 if you as the leader can begin to splatter organizational empathy all over the place, to give people a chance to understand what others are doing, what that means, right? And how they can do better at doing that together. This is going to require three things. It's going to require transparency amongst your team. These are ideals, I understand, but allow me to be idealistic from hot moment, okay? Remember, I was cynical about creatives earlier. This is the idealistic part. Transparency, it's going to require some communication, right? And it's going to require a degree of trust, right? So we're going to have to build empathy by not being as secretive, maybe not holding our cards, right? And some people on your team actually do that, right? Some of your silos on your team are actually what I would call informational silos. There are people on your team that control all the information, and they use that as a way of siloing. So let's open up. Some of you are smiling right now. Sorry, I didn't mean to hit close to home. But let's see if we can't figure out how to break down some of that communication wise, and then build trust. All right, that we can build trust through transparency and through communication. I did this exercise with my team a week ago. It's so basic, you guys. You're like, thank you, Lee. But some of you may have a team meeting next week, and you may need to scrap part of your agenda and spend the first 30 minutes doing this very simple exercise where you just spend a few minutes talking about empathy. I'll send it to you guys, just kind of set up the idea. And then basic on the size of your team, pair them up in twos or threes and have them actually spend some time and be strategic on how you pair them up. Even if this is a volunteer group, maybe if you're largely volunteer led, like Amos, I know you got a lot of volunteers. Maybe you do this in a volunteer role, but it's like, let's talk about what are the two things at the moment that you're most enthusiastic about? And I set it up personally and professionally. So some of it's personal and some of it's like in my leadership or in my ministry. And then what are two of the greatest things that I'm most frustrated or challenged by at the moment? And you say, well, Lee, this sounds like a one-on-one. Yes. But what if the stuff that they're sharing with you one-on-one as you coach them, they were actually sharing with each other on their ministry team? How would that effectively start to maybe bring some walls down, make them a little bit more transparent, less siloed? We had some very interesting conversations amongst our team when you have production people with people who demand a lot of production people, and you put them in the same group and they get to talk about joys and frustration. That's fun because they get to hear a different perspective. And so the only way we can build empathy, you guys, is to actually put people in a position where they can do that. Any thoughts on that? Unmute.
I think for us, Lee, I think that's great. I think I'm going to scrap what I had planned. Obviously, being in Lancaster, there's a
We have
mixture of,
empathy that you're in Lancaster, Joe.
thank you. Thank you. Yeah, okay, don't remind me. But anyways, we have a mixture of a team that was established there before I showed up, and then the team that I've been bringing in. And obviously, through the transition and changes and stuff, we're building rapport and building, inserting more of our leadership style. And so, with that, I could see this being very helpful and useful amongst themselves.
Could be a one-on-one tool as well, you guys. If you don't have that kind of a setting, it could be something you start off some one-on-ones with as you kick off the year. Because what I would do is I would leverage that both for empathy and then to help them solve some of that. How do I get you in a position where your greatest joys are actually something that you experience more often? And how do I help you navigate some of the frustrations that you're experiencing? In Joe's case, I'll speak to Joe's case in Lancaster. He alluded to it. He also has people in his church who he's got to figure out how to have empathy for, because they've got a lot. They're creating barriers for him to change, but they also have a buttload of history. And so the level of empathy that he has is going to have a great deal of impact on his ability and the speed at which he can bring change. So some of us, we change things without empathy, and then we wonder why we get bruised and beat up. And so doesn't mean we shouldn't change. I just think we've got to make sure we're wearing that empathy, that empathetic leadership on our arm. Anybody else want to comment? Any of the guys on the call, team wise? Derek, you were part of that exercise. If you're still on here, I don't know if you want to add anything to how it went down.
Yeah, I think it's just helpful for everyone to get a chance to say it out loud. And there's stuff that, like one of our production guys was in my group, and just to hear even him talk about the balance between wanting production to be excellent and to have a healthy team. Frankly, for me, it was kind of eye-opening, because my natural assumption is they're just trying to run, quote unquote, the tech team, if you will. So speaking to it, it might sound basic to us. And even when you introduced it, Lee, I was like, okay, we'll see. But there's gold to be mined in there, and also even the ability for team members to grow in respect for each other, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, most of us on this call are at the top of the food chain in our organizations. And sometimes, if I can just be candid again, we lack empathy at the top of the food chain. And so we see things like this and we go, yeah, I don't get it. If they want to talk to me about that stuff, right? And so we start to lose connection. And so we have to sometimes use some of these basic tools to actually reestablish some of those bridges for people. So be careful that you don't dismiss your position, right? Dismiss the culture of your team based on your position in the organization. Any other comments? We got one more pop, and then we'll be done. Okay.
Hey, Lee,
Yes, please, McKenna.
what's the largest size group that you would do this with?
When we did it last week. We just put groups of 2 or 3 together, but we had our whole staff in the room. We set it all up with the whole staff, and then we just broke off. Then this is the mechanics of it. And then we just came back together, and a few people just kind of shared, but they shared about other people. So it was like, hey man, it was great to hear that Joe said he gets, that his greatest joy is doing this. I'm going to love seeing him do that now, because I understand. Right. And so some of that sharing, it wasn't them sharing their greatest joys and frustration to the larger group. It was actually them sharing what was shared in their smaller pod. And that was kind of
Awesome.
that was actually an unintentional cool moment
Yeah, that's awesome.
for
Thank
them
you.
to share that out loud. Okay. Last thing. This is what we call evangelistic empathy. Okay. It's a new term. I just made it up. So you're going to tweet it out or do something like that. But okay. It's the same idea, but it's the last thing we're going to do on the call today. It speaks to the trend that Carrie said, that evangelism is dying in the churches. So as I read that, I thought, okay, how do we revive it, right? And I think there's obviously tools of evangelism, and there's invite culture, and there's, are your environments ready, and do you have tools for your people? All that. Let's back that up, though, okay? Today, we're not having a conversation about putting invite cards in your people's hands and having a good Easter plan. Let's back it up, and let's use the same philosophy we just used on the organizational side, and let's use it on our community side, okay? So basically, I just thrown these on the screen. You might have better ones, but basically asking the question to our teams, and maybe you do this in your smaller teams, um, in the people that we serve in our community that are not here in our church yet, right? That are gonna be potentially coming in to connect with Christ, to connect our church. What are their greatest priorities right now? What do they care about? Their ambitions? What are their greatest concern? What are the 3 or 4 realities and challenges for them at the moment? And then what are one key thing that we're observing that is an opportunity? There's something that we are uniquely equipped to do. That's the non-derivative part. That's where I think it was Kevin who said the announcement thing. I think Carrie's onto something with non-derivative. The little bit of a pivot I would say is, what is it that you bring to your culture and community that's non-derivative? Okay. I want to be careful what I'm about to say here because I might get church canceled. But the reality is when you're in a business, you're gonna do things like what are the things that someone would drive by somebody else's coffee shop and come to my coffee shop? I don't know if some of you are like, ooh, that's an icky thing to say, but track with me here. The reality is we have to think about, we call them values at Growmentum. What is the unique values at the Crossing in Natomas? What are the unique values at New North in San Francisco? What are the unique values at Encounter East? What would make someone drive by other opportunities to connect in community, to connect in different ways, and potentially seek us out? What is our greatest non-derivative, right? What is our uniqueness that we can bring? But you need to filter that empathetically within what are the priorities and the concerns of the people around us. Make sense? So I'm with Tony at Church 180 today. Conversation we had this morning before we wrap up this call we had this morning was, what is unique to Church 180 as a 5-year-old church plant? They have an informality. They have an organicness to them because they're new and they're 200 or 300 people, right? The challenge is, how do we leverage that non-derivative and lean into that, right? Without it becoming something that actually becomes a barrier or becomes something that stops us from growing. And so that's the challenge for you guys out there. So I want you to have this conversation around this. I think it's important for us to do that. And they were asking the question, what is our non-derivative contribution? This is our last slide. What is our unique competitive advantage? Don't cancel me, but it's the best term we can use, okay? What is it that we bring? What is unique about your church, your community from any other church experience nearby?
Well, and Lee, two things. One, I can remember a business leader pouring into me years ago, and he said, in my business, I could tell you every one of my competitors' strengths and weaknesses. So in other words, he was able to articulate his unique identifier, and it made him a better business and helped develop them and grow. And I would even add and say, in that same process, we need to know the strengths and weaknesses of other churches in our area. And I'll even say that this is one of the best processes in a strategic momentum process. Any of the churches that we walk alongside of, whether Lee, Kay, me, Brandon, any of us, as we're walking through this with other churches, this is probably one of the most fruitful conversations if you spend time asking this question. Why are we unique? The UI of our church. Why do people drive by other churches to come to us? That helps us be more strategic in our alignment as an organization, and it helps us to put fuel on the fire of what we're doing right. So don't look this conversation, because this is a key and critical conversation that we can have in our churches.
Yeah, we may have saved the best 4 minutes for last. So before you jump off, when you look at Carrie's trend of non-derivative, I would rather you look at these questions before you go change your announcements and try to do an altar call. You can do all of that, but that's the danger of his trend, is you don't want to be non-derivative for non-derivative's sake. Does that make sense? Like, so I want Kelly up there in Salt Lake to ask the question, what is these 3 questions? Like, literally, somebody screenshot and dump these in the chat for you guys. Because I think I would, if you're an exec guy, I would go to my lead guy right now and I would say, we need to have a conversation. If I'm an exec guy, if I'm a lead guy, I would go to my exec team or my staff and I would say, help me with this, right? What is unique? Let me finish these 3. What is unique about your church, fill in your blank, in your community, even from other church experiences, okay? Because we need to lean in and leverage those strengths. How are we, or could we leverage that uniqueness for greater impact in 2025? And how hard do we actually desire to work, pray, and invest in this unique vision of the future versus just imitating others around us? That third question is sort of personal and kind of gets to the heart of, if we know who we are, how willing are we to actually live that out and to stay the course and not get distracted by what the Crossing's doing over here, or what Avenue's doing over here, or what Bayside's doing over here? That's going to be crucial. All right. Okay. I don't know if anybody screenshot that, but it's gone now. So it's gone forever. You're never seeing it again. All right. Cool. Closing thoughts or comments? Anybody? Say something profound if you're going to be at the end. Brief and profound. I think Ryan wants to say something. Come on, Worship. Let's go. Brief and profound. Going once. Going twice. Cool. Guys, part of what we shared today is a little bit of that process that we've done with many of the churches on this call. Some of you have reached out because you're looking at opportunities to potentially do that. As I started the call with this, now is the time for us, even if you're thinking like sometime this summer, whatever, like we'd like to have an S&P, or we'd like to have like a day. Let's have a conversation around how to lock that in so that it works best in your timing. Because if we don't, then your timing may not work best to actually execute it. And so if you're missing any of these pieces, the reality is it needs to be embedded more holistically. So I'm not discouraging you from going in and asking these questions. I'm just saying ultimately it needs to be these questions asked on a wider umbrella that then begins to also provide a strategic outlet for this to be true. So that would be our hope and goal for you guys, that would be true in 2025. All right? Cool. You will get an invite for the next call sometime tomorrow, and you'll get an email with this recording and with all the stuff. Plus, Jeff will include some of the relief tips or the relief outlets that Jeff gave. All right. Let me pray for us. Actually, you know what? Is Owen still on the call? Owens, are you still on there? He's like, I don't think I want to be. He might have signed off.
Lee, what's up? I'm here.
You, my friend,
Yeah.
as the Pope, you will close us in prayer.
I would love to. I would love to. Father, we thank you that you've given us the privilege and the honor to reach our community, to be a part of what you're doing, and that is something that we take seriously. And Father, we just thank you for the wisdom and the insight that's been provided. We know that we're leading and pastoring in difficult and challenging times. Father, we pray that you would give us wisdom. You said if we would ask that you would give it. So we need that. We ask it in Jesus' name. God, as we just begin to plan our year ahead, I pray for wisdom, for vision on how to reach our communities. Pray that you would enable us to not only serve with sympathy, but even more importantly, with empathy. God, give us the ability to listen, to hear the heart and soul of our community so that we can reach them for Jesus. And finally, Father, as we wrap up, we pray for those who've been affected by the devastating fires in California. Not only the families that have been affected, but those who are on the boots on the ground that are serving, and those who are ministering to the needs. I pray for Snod, his team, other churches. We pray for the local church to shine. May this be a bright moment in what is a tragic, difficult time. Speak a blessing over these pastors, blessing over Growmentum. God, give us a good, fruitful year ahead in Jesus' name. Amen.
Come on.
Steve, you're a stud. Love you, bro.
Steve,
Love you, Snod.
Yeah. By the way, I'm Snod.